Do you want me to pause it?
Question 2, correctly answered by 88% of the group. Good job. Question 3,
I missed two. You got it right.
Oh, wait, I missed one. I missed one.
I missed four too. I changed to three. I shouldn't change it. Why did I think second guess myself? Oh my goodness.
I missed one. I'll take it.
Hey, I missed the whole quiz.
I am not going to do quizzes like this next year. They're going to be done on the off days, not on the date days. All right? If you got thoughts on that, please let me know. But it just takes too much time out of the debate, which I think is appropriate. So if you got thoughts on that, please let me know your thoughts. Okay? All right, let's get started.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, fellow peers. My name is Elizabeth Lugo, and I'm here with my colleagues Brianna Mendez and Paul Vang. We are here to convince you guys that we need to make recycling of consumer goods mandated by federal law. Currently, it's been delegated with individual states, like doing as they feel is necessary for their individual state. And we need to make changes because this has been going on for a little over a century. And the only thing that's changing are the increases in the consumption of consumer goods. The waste is increasing, the increase of manufactured goods, and the pollutions we're causing to the environment. There are also the problems of states abusing other states and dumping their trash because they don't want to deal with it in their own state, but they're willing to pay the money to do it. An example would be New York, who transports most of their waste to other states, and because they produce 36,000 tons of trash daily. It's costing them $400 million annually to transport trash in big diesel trucks to other states. What makes New York better than any other state? Why should any other state have to deal with the repercussions of them dumping their trash, having other states deal with it? Unfortunately, if we continue to trash our environment and pollute the air, we'll not be able to easily pay our way out of that. Once the problem becomes more significant, damages become unrepairable to our natural resources. Recycling, in definition, is the converting of waste into reusable materials. It's done through a process of collecting, sorting, and collecting, separating, and sorting, and then reusing the materials to make new items. If you guys go on to californiarecycle.gov, it's California's recycling site. They promote the 3 R's in there. The whole program, the whole website is based on educating and promoting recycling. The way that they say that they promote the 3 R's is we recycle unwanted materials, so we reduce the amount of waste and use of new natural resources, and we reuse those products to manufacture new goods. We basically recycle to save materials and energy. The amount of energy used to make one new can of aluminum, we could produce 20 cans through recycled aluminum. For every plastic ton we recycle, we could save 16 gallons of oil. California's the recycle program that I just mentioned offers grants and loans to recycling business startups. Oh, I'm sorry, second slide. Sorry about that. The website, as I said, was to educate and motivate recycling, and it offers grants and loans to startup recycling businesses. It has maps of all locations and how to dispose properly of other types of recyclable material or waste, such as oil, tires, electronic waste, paint, batteries, organics, and how to dispose of them properly. It also educates on what goes in what bins, and it covers also all what's been mandatory in California through laws and regulations. California has implemented a couple of regulations, and they're bills that are signed by whoever's in office at the time. But some of the ones that we have passed are Assembly Bill 939, which requires 50% reduction of waste that is being sent to landfills by 2020, and also 75% by 2025. Another Assembly bill requires businesses to recycle organic waste. For organic waste. And California was also the first to ban plastic bags. And in exchange, they're charging a fee for reusable bags, which are just a heavier plastic that we could reuse. As we are saying at our table, that the bags that are currently being used, it states on them that they could be used 125 times, and then they could be recycled to go back into the process of making a new product. There's also the Fresno County Utilities Waste and Management also informs what kinds of bins are available for curbside pickups, residential, commercial, and recycling pickups. Fresno County also offers a program that's called Operation Cleanup once a year, where you put out all your trash and the city comes to pick it up. Basically, what can be recycled through the recycle trucks that come around, I'm talking specifically about California and Fresno in particular, is aluminum, certain types of plastic, paper, and cardboard. We feel that what's lacking in recycling is the education of people. Just the other day, I pulled over a recycling truck in my neighborhood, and I asked him to give me a sheet of what's listed that can be recycled. And he didn't have anything on him, but they do leave you warnings if you constantly put things that you can't recycle in those bins. And so he just said those basic things could be recycled, but he wasn't aware of what types of the plastics and that. So that just shows the lack of education that even the recycling truck drivers have of what they're picking up. Recycling, people make a profit of it. One bale of plastic is worth approximately $800. And if recycling rates were at 75%, we could create 1.1 million jobs by 2030. I just want to say, this short video is about what happens to recyclables. And it starts. Oh.
Approximately 2/3 the time for each of us every year. Twice as much per capita in Europe and Japan. Okay. That's not that bad.
208 to 340.
So 2/3 a day and so 50.
When I got to Sims Recycling Plant in Brooklyn, I found a huge warehouse where 800 tons of recyclables from all over New York are dropped off. Despite the great setup at Sims, there are a lot of issues with recycling. First of all, Americans kind of suck at it. According to the EPA, about 75% of all of our waste is actually recyclable, yet our recycling rates hang around 34% nationally. That basically means that only a third of every single thing we use and throw out every day is making it to the recycling bin. And don't get me started with New Yorkers. We only recycle 17% of our waste.
This is a garbage can right outside our office. You can see there's paper and there's some cans in there, cups. All of these things are recyclable. And they're in trash right when there's a recycling bin right next door.
Only about 50% of recyclables in New York City are getting recycled right now. And I think that's largely a result of maybe a lack of public education, the fact that the rules have changed over time. Maybe some people just don't care enough or don't know why they should care. And I think all of those kind of issues can really be addressed through education.
For their part, Sims offers daily educational tours of their plant in an effort to boost our low recycling rates. Low rates aren't the only issue though. Sam also told me about another problem called wish cycling. That's when people put trash into the recycling bin, hoping it can be recycled, when in fact it cannot.
I would say it's about 10 to 13% of what we get is not something we want to receive. Those kinds of materials are maybe extra plastic bags, plastic film, maybe little bits of food scraps mixed in with those containers.
Wish cycling wastes a lot of energy and fuel because items are shipped to a plant like Sims, sorted, and then eventually just sent to the dump. I wanted to see if my coworkers and I were guilty of any wish cycling, so I convinced Sam to go through our bag with me. We're not wearing gloves because, is that okay with you?
Yeah, we do this every day.
Okay. By looking through our bag, I learned we made some mistakes, like putting paper towels in the recycling bin. They're actually compostable. He also told me important tips, like cutting down on plastic straw.
So the purpose of the last part of that video was that as Americans, we lack the education in what we could even recycle. And if we made recycling mandatory to federal law, we could implement different rules and policies, and one would hopefully be based on education. I just want to talk quickly about recycling, how it touches on every necessity that's required to sustain life on Earth. The air we breathe is being contaminated by landfills. By the landfills, air emissions from biodegradation, one of the most serious ones being methane, which is a constituent of natural gas. Also, the land we live on and the soil we grow our food on is being covered by the landfills. There's approximately 3,091 active landfills in the entire world, and 10,000 old ones. We can compost instead and help the soil and help us produce healthier food. Our oceans are also our last resource of water if it ever came down to that point. We talked about desalting water as our very last resort, completely, if we were in a crisis of water. So not only would we have to desalt water, we would have to actually take the pollution out, which would be hard because plastic cannot decompose. It takes a long time, but plastic decompose, it takes 1,450 years for plastic to decompose. And so the particle, they just break down into small particles. So that would be a difficult task and very, very expensive. And that's about it.
Hello. Okay. So, thank you to my partner Liz for actually introducing briefly on the subject of environmental impact. And many scientists actually say that recycling helps clean our environment, but why are so many of us reluctant and hesitant in promoting these recycling rates? And just last year, CalRecycle actually stated that the recycling rates have actually dropped or lowered by 3% instead of going up. So it's kind of worrisome as health educators to realize that even though we're promoting and creating all these initiative programs to promote our necessities of tomorrow, we're still behind and on the down cycle of recycling. So this brings me to my main point and the issue that we want to tackle as a whole, and that is how we can and what we can do to correctly educate the public about recycling and the environmental impacts. So by not focusing on the good that comes with recycling, we see a lot of negative downsides, such as a lot of pollution happening and a lot of natural resources being wasted and not being consumed correctly. So this brings us to my other point. Toxic waste, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and oil spills, it's all pollution, and these pollutions are polluting our air, our water, and soil, some of our most important natural resources. And since Earth is actually a closed system, we need to carefully monitor how we use these natural resources, because once we use these natural resources, everything that's being put out into the air will stay in here, because there's no way for the gases to leave the Earth actually. And on to air pollution. So when you think of air pollution, usually what comes to mind for myself is black clouds. Pollution doesn't even sound like a good thing. So the burning of fossil fuels and energy plants and vehicles spew out a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which inevitably leads to climate change or the weather getting warmer. And the same can be said for industrial processes. The more that we are producing raw materials, more industrial companies and manufacturers are creating more toxins going out into the atmosphere, which contribute to pollution such as smog and acid rain. And in effect, these chemical exposures affect not only us humans, but our wildlife and our habitats. So, and then our next environmental aspect that we want to cover is water pollution. 1.1 billion people don't have access to water, and 2.4 billion people don't have adequate sanitation. And as health educators, we need to promote and encourage environmental awareness, not only locally, but also nationally and on an international level, because of the high chances of people from all over the world contracting deadly diseases. So you may ask, how does this bring about, or how does this relate to public health? Well, it's simple. Waste that's being put out and being put back into our streams and our lakes and our water and our rivers actually harm our animals and our ecosystems. So, and in return, sometimes this will affect the sea creatures and their oxygen levels, which might result in some dead zones and and most importantly, it affects the way our marine life comes back into our food sources. So the EPA actually estimates that more than 100,000 marine mammals die each year from ingestion and relating to plastic debris. So these diseases from polluted water increase not only our animal and wildlife diseases, but also human diseases and hospital visits. Sorry guys. Okay, so soil pollution and land pollution. This is actually a very important one, and before we actually start, I want to talk about a little bit about renewable and non-renewable resources, because soil is actually a non-renewable resource it's not finite, so meaning that it's not here for a long time, or there's a certain amount of it before it all comes to an end. So, with this being said, landfill actually requires a lot of land space, which emits methane and disposes waste that is not treated or toxins from products that
Well, thank you guys all for listening. So there are many benefits of recycling, from reducing the natural resources. Forward. Got it. Thank you. Okay. So from reducing the use of natural resources and energy consumption to saving money and creating jobs, recycling greatly benefits the environment and economy. Recycling saves non-renewable resources, such as if you were to recycle paper, it will only take 20%. However, compared to the 80% that you will use it from the resources that were not recycled. So recycling also plays an important role in the economy by ensuring waste is reused and reduced. It costs less to operate a well-running recycling program than waste collection, landfilling, and incineration. It takes 95% less energy to recycle aluminum more than it does to make it from raw materials. Using scrap steel instead of like the virgin ones to make new steels takes less than 40% less water and creates 97% less mining waste. So you would ask, how would this help create jobs and boost our economy? Incinerating 10,000 tons of waste creates 1 job, while landfilling the same amount creates 6 jobs. And recycling the same amount of the 10,000 tons creates 36 jobs. The National Recycling Coalition reports that recycling has created 1.1 million jobs, $236 billion in gross annual sales, and about $37 billion in annual payroll. By meeting the state's 50% recycling goal, California is expected to create about 45,000 recycling jobs, compared to the 20,000 new jobs that's slated to create for the manufacturing sector. So why is recycling important to the future generations? Don't you want the life of your children? I'll start that again. So solutions to recycling. First of all, it starts with you. You have to think about the 3 R's, which starts with the reduce, reuse, and recycle. Before you buy something, ask yourself if do you really need it? Because the real issue about recycling, it's not about the products that we use or the fuels that we consume, but it's about learning to live a less disposable lifestyle rather than relying on recycling or downcycling as a solution. So recycling is the last choice after reduce and reuse. For example, if you wanted to take a step into recycling or reducing the use of natural resources, think about eating organic foods. You can purchase from farmers market or even start your own, and that's just the first steps going towards something like that. And okay, alright. So along with the materials that you have at home, such as like light bulbs, plastic bags, or batteries, something that you don't know how to recycle, you can always drop it off at stores such as Lowe's, Home Depots, or IKEA, and also donate to Goodwill, like the clothing that you don't want anymore. And a lot of the creative solutions to help you build money on the side is try selling to Craigslist or on websites that you're able to make a side income. I would just like to end our recycling pro to think about the beauty of our nature and the well-being of our family, as well as the health of our future generations. It is our responsibility to ensure that waste is recycled and our environment is protected. So to remember to reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Hello, my name is Chi. Today my colleagues and I, we will be representing the con side of recycling. Before going to depth, I'm going to share a brief introduction why recycling should not be mandated. First of all, let me ask you a question. Who's in here recycle? By a show of hands.
Raise my hand for me.
Great, congratulations guys. The waste that you guys actually recycle may not actually get recycled. In fact, a vast majority, which is about 79% of our consumer goods, goes to landfill or our natural environment. Let's look at plastic for example. The United States produces way too many plastic than what is actually needed. Out of the 8.3 million metric tons of plastic that has been produced, about 6.3 metric tons have become plastic waste. And of that, only 9% have been recycled. If this trend were to continue, statistics shows that by 2050, there will be about 12 billion tons of plastic waste in our landfills. Now, this is just plastic alone. Imagine if other consumer goods were in this situation. Why should we have them here when they should have been here in the first place? Recycling set the general idea that by putting materials in a recycle bin and by buying products made of recycled materials, we are saving the environment. But how effective is that? When US alone still produce about 250 million tons of trash every year. Recycling main impact is to convince us that it's okay to be wasteful in other areas. Why? Because we make it up through recycling. It encourages consumption rather than putting out waste to reduce. It encourages consumption rather than putting out waste to reduce consumption overall. Therefore, recycling should not be mandated. Moving forward, we will be discussing about the toxic environment pollution that comes from recycling, the amount of trash that we create over the years in US and other countries, landfill, incineration, products and its problem, and the cost. And by the way, please let me know if you guys don't want to recycle by the end of this debate. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Braulio, and I'm going to be talking about the recycling hoax. In California, we've established a 75% goal of source reduction and recycling. And although this sounds like a good idea, it ignores the consequences that come with an increase of recycling. For example, the initiative has led to an increase of wishful recycling. Wishful recyclers just throw their blue bins into these blue bins and feel better about themselves because they assumed that these goods will be reused, but they won't. We see an increase of contamination of these recyclables, and we don't want to deal with it here in the United States, so we ship it overseas to countries such as China, Taiwan, and South Korea. But as of January 1st, 2018, China has decided that they've had enough of our recyclables because the recyclables that we assumed were recycled instead end up in these countries' land, their waters, and then their foods. The recyclables that we recycled instead are killing these countries and giving them illnesses. So, can you watch the clip so they can understand why?
However, with the newly found wealth have come severe environmental costs. Since only part of the waste stream can truly be recycled, and due to the hazardous nature of the waste itself, and the hazardous processes employed in recycling it, the pollution in and around the town has become obvious and ugly. 60-year-old Mr. Ling summed up the town's transformation this way to a Chinese journalist.
For money, people have made a mess of this good farming village. After they have dismantled the computers, they burn the useless parts. Every day, villagers inhale this dirty air. Their bodies have become weak. Many people have developed respiratory and skin problems. Some people wash vegetables in dishes with the polluted water, and they get stomach sickness.
Open dumping of the unrecyclable plastics, processing residues, burned and discarded circuit boards, leaded CRT glass, toner cartridges, and other debris is commonplace.
Printer waste, computer waste, printer cartridges, plastic, mylar, videotapes, all dumped wherever they can find a place to dump it, usually by water. This is the disposal system for monitors from the USA. This is where their final resting place is, the end of their life cycle. A roadside ditch in the heart of China.
For the last 5 years, well water and surface water in Guayu has been undrinkable and has to be trucked in from a town 30 kilometers away. Water tanks hauled by tractors are a constant sight on the streets of Guayu.
He's transporting water into the village. I asked him why. You take water to sell it there. And he said, the water there tastes no good.
And how long have they been transporting water into the village?
They've been doing it for 5 years now.
And how long has the electronic waste been in this village?
According to the other men that were in the field, 5 to 6 years.
But although the drinking water is no longer drinkable and the air smells foul, the populace of Guayu is still largely ignorant of the health impacts of the imported poisons.
So as a result of China's ban, the recycling industries here in the United States and all across the world are facing chaos. Recycling centers are now looking for new markets to trash, only to realize that there's no additional countries willing to take an additional amount of our recyclables. So as a result, these recycling centers are throwing these recyclables back into a landfill. So after a long, costly process that further depletes our scarce natural resources and contributes to pollution while destroying the environment of other countries, it will ultimately end up back into a landfill. So I urge you, please stop recycling. Don't let other countries face the consequences of our lifestyles. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Preet. So a big argument when it comes to recycling is that it's said to be a way to end pollution and that it will make the planet better. Well, I'm here to tell you no, it will not. Recycling will not clean up the planet, nor will it save it. It's not going to help that end land pollution, it's just going to create more land, soil, and water pollution than we already have. As much as people say it will allow for a cleaner environment, it simply is not true. Look around us, look at the city we live in, look at the world we live in. Pollution is just getting worse and worse. The recycling program has been propagated so much that it makes us feel like we're making a difference, when in reality, we're just making it worse by adding more pollution and allowing the rich to get richer. People who trust recycling programs are hypocrites in my mind. The reason why is on one side,